Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars through the main viewer of the New Horizon. His crew had been exploring this sector for 3 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of life. So far, they had found nothing but empty planets and dead rocks floating in space. "Captain, I'm picking up something on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park from her station. She was the ship's tactical officer and one of the best Morrison had ever worked with. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. As she tried to make sense of what she was seeing, Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of something, Lisa?" "Multiple contacts, sir. Large ones. They're moving fast and heading straight for us." Park's voice carried a note of concern that made Morrison's stomach tighten. In all their months of exploration, they had never encountered another ship. "How many contacts?" Morrison asked, standing up from his chair. 15 ships, Captain. Maybe more. They're big, much bigger than us." Park looked up from her console. "Sir, these aren't like any ships in our database. The energy signatures are completely different." Morrison felt his heart start to beat faster. This was it. First contact with an alien species. Everything they had trained for, everything Earth had prepared for, was about to happen. He took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations," Morrison ordered. The bridge lights dimmed and red warning lights began flashing throughout the ship. "Open a channel on all frequencies. Let's try to talk to them." The main viewer flickered and changed to show space ahead of them. In the distance, Morrison could see lights moving toward them. As they got closer, he could make out the shapes of the alien ships. They were huge dark vessels that looked like they were built for war. Each one was at least 3 times the size of the New Horizon. "Channel open, Captain," reported the communications officer, Ensign Bobby Chun. Morrison straightened his uniform and cleared his throat. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship New Horizon. We come in peace and wish to establish peaceful contact with your people. Please respond." For several long minutes, there was no answer. The alien ships continued to approach, their formation tight and disciplined. Morrison tried again, this time using the universal mathematical sequences that Earth scientists had developed for first contact situations. Suddenly, the main viewer changed. An alien face appeared on the screen, and Morrison had to work hard not to show his shock. The creature looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird, with scales covering its face and sharp, predatory eyes. When it spoke, its voice was deep and harsh. "Primitive vessel, you will lower your defensive systems and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." The alien's words were translated by the ship's computer, but the tone needed no translation. "It was a threat." Morrison exchanged glances with his bridge crew. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. "Unknown vessel, we are explorers from the planet Earth. We mean you no harm. We wish only to establish peaceful relations between our peoples." The alien's eyes narrowed. "You will comply with our demands immediately. The Zalarian Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. You have 30 seconds to lower your shields and surrender." "Zalarian Empire?" Morrison whispered to himself. He looked at Park, who was studying her tactical display with intense concentration. "Captain," Park said quietly, "their weapons are powered up and locked onto us. These ships are definitely military, and they're not here to talk." Morrison made a decision that would change everything. "Lisa, what are options?" Park's fingers flew over her console. "We're outnumbered 15-1, but we're faster and more maneuverable. If we can get close to that asteroid field, we might be able to lose them." "Sir," interrupted Ensign Chun, "the lead ship is hailing us again." The alien admiral appeared on the screen once more. Morrison could see the bridge of the alien ship behind him, filled with similar creatures working at various stations. Your time is up, Primitive. You will surrender now or be destroyed. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. These were good people, dedicated officers who had volunteered for this dangerous mission. He would not let them be captured without a fight. I'm sorry, Admiral, but we cannot comply with your demands. We are peaceful explorers, and we will not surrender to threats. The alien's face twisted with what might have been anger or surprise. No species has ever refused the demands of the Zalarian Empire. You will regret this decision. The transmission cut off, and Morrison turned to Park. Lisa, get us out of here. Best possible speed toward that asteroid field. Aye, sir. All hands, brace for evasive maneuvers. The New Horizon suddenly lurched forward as its engines came to full power. Behind them, the Zalarian ships began firing their energy weapons, lighting up space with deadly beams of light. Park skillfully guided the human ship through a series of sharp turns and sudden direction changes, using every trick she had learned in her years of training. Direct hit on our rear shields, reported the tactical officer. Shields holding at 70%. Morrison gripped his chair as another blast shook the ship. How long until we reach the asteroid field? 2 minutes, Captain, but they're gaining on us. Morrison watched the tactical display, seeing the enemy ships closing the distance. The Zalarian vessels were powerful, but they were also large and not as quick to change direction as the smaller human ship. Lisa, can you target their engines? Park's hands moved over her console with practiced skill. I can try, sir. Firing photon torpedoes. The New Horizon's weapons fired, sending bright streaks of energy toward the nearest Zalarian ship. The torpedoes struck the alien vessel's rear section, causing explosions that lit up its hull. The ship slowed and began to fall behind the others. Direct hit on the lead cruiser, Park reported. Their engines are damaged. But the other Zalarian ships kept coming, their weapons continuing to fire at the fleeing human vessel. Morrison could see the asteroid field ahead, a maze of rocks and debris that would provide cover if they could reach it. 30 seconds to. The asteroid field, called out the helmsman. Lieutenant Tony Rodriguez. Another energy blast struck the New Horizon, this time hitting the port side. The lights on the bridge flickered, and Morrison could hear damage reports coming in from all over the ship. Shields at 40%, Park announced. We're taking heavy damage. Morrison made another quick decision. Tony, take us into the densest part of the field. Use the asteroids for cover. The New Horizon plunged into the asteroid field, weaving between huge rocks and chunks of ice. The Zalarian ships followed, but their larger size made navigation much more difficult. One of the alien vessels scraped against a large asteroid, tearing a long gash in its hull. Captain, I'm detecting an opening in the asteroid field, Rodriguez reported. If we can reach it, we might be able to jump to hyperspace. Do it, Morrison ordered. The ship raced through the maze of asteroids, the Zalarian vessels struggling to keep up. Finally, they broke free of the field and into open space. Morrison could see the stars ahead, representing freedom and safety. Hyperspace engines are ready, Captain, called out the chief engineer, Commander Rick Barnes, from the engine room. Jump, Morrison ordered. The stars suddenly stretched into lines of light, and the New Horizon disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the frustrated Zalarian ships behind in the asteroid field. In the silence that followed, Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. They had survived humanity's first contact with an alien species, but it had not gone as anyone had hoped. The Zalarian Empire, whatever that was, had proven to be hostile and aggressive. Set course for Earth, Morrison said quietly. Maximum speed. We need to warn them about what's coming. As the New Horizon raced through hyperspace toward home, none of them knew that they had just made a terrible mistake. The Zalarian Empire now knew that humans existed, and Admiral Vextar was already planning his revenge. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, and no primitive species had ever successfully fought them and escaped. But they were about to learn that humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. 3 months had passed since the New Horizon returned to Earth with news of the Zalarian Empire. The warning came just in time. Long-range sensors detected a massive alien fleet approaching the outer edge of the solar system, exactly as Captain Morrison had predicted. Admiral Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Liberty's Edge, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. He was a veteran of many conflicts, though none quite like this one. Behind him, his bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, preparing for humanity's first real space battle against an alien enemy. Admiral, the Zalarian fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, reported Commander Susan Blake from her position at the tactical station. 50 ships, just as our intelligence predicted. They're moving toward Earth at standard approach speed. Carter nodded slowly. Everything was going according to plan, though he knew his crew didn't understand the full picture yet. Signal the fleet. All ships are to take position as planned. We'll meet them at the outer defense line. The human defense fleet consisted of 20 ships, a mix of destroyers, cruisers, and Carter's battleship. To anyone watching, it looked like Earth was throwing everything it had at the approaching enemy. The ships moved into formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. On the other side of the system, Admiral Vextar studied the human formation from his command ship, the Eternal Dominion. The alien commander's scaled face showed satisfaction as he counted the enemy vessels. Only 20 ships, he said to his second-in-command, Commander Krelta. These humans are even more primitive than I thought. Their entire defense fleet is smaller than one of our battle groups. Krelta looked at the tactical display with his predatory eyes. Should we demand their surrender, Admiral? Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. No, we will destroy them completely. The Empire must make an example of any species that dares to resist us. Other worlds will hear of what happened here and know better than to defy us. The Zalarian fleet advanced in perfect formation, their dark ships blocking out the stars. Each vessel was a masterpiece of Imperial engineering, built to project power and inspire fear across the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds with fleets, just like this one dot. As the two fleets approached each other, Admiral Carter opened a communication channel to all his ships. This is Admiral Carter to all vessels. Remember your training. Stay flexible, watch your wingmen, and follow the plan. Today we show these aliens what human courage looks like. The first shots were fired when the fleets were still millions of kilometers apart. The Zalarian ships opened up with their heavy plasma cannons, sending streams of deadly energy across space. The human ships responded with their own weapons, photon torpedoes and particle beams lighting up the darkness. Commander Blake's destroyer squadron was the first to engage directly. Her ship, the Defender, led 5 other destroyers in a high-speed attack run against the Zalarian left flank. The human ships moved with surprising speed and agility, darting between the larger alien vessels like wolves attacking a herd of massive beasts. Target their weapon systems, Blake ordered her gunner, Lieutenant Pete Johnson. If we can't destroy them, we'll make them less dangerous. The Defender's weapons found their mark, striking one of the Zalarian cruisers right in its main gun. Battery. The explosion tore a huge hole in the alien ship's hull, and it began to drift away from the formation. But the Zalarians were not helpless. Their return fire was devastating, and one of Blake's destroyers, the Courageous, took a direct hit that split the ship in half. The crew had no time to escape before their ship exploded in a ball of fire. Courageous is gone, Blake reported. Grimly, continuing attack run. Above the main battle, Colonel Tony Martinez led his fighter squadrons in a desperate dance with death. His pilots flew small, fast ships that could barely scratch the paint on a Zalarian cruiser, but they served an important purpose. They distracted the enemy gunners and drew fire away from the larger human ships. "Gold Squadron, form up on me," Martinez called over the radio. "We're going after that command ship's sensor array." 20 human fighters dove toward the Eternal Dominion, their small weapons blazing. The massive alien ship's defensive guns swiveled to track them, filling space with deadly fire. Martinez watched 3 of his pilots die in the first few seconds, their ships vanishing in bright flashes. "Keep going," he shouted to his remaining pilots. "For Earth." The surviving fighters reached their target and unleashed everything they had at the Zalarian flagship's sensor dish. The explosion was small compared to the size of the massive ship, but it was enough to blind the vessel's long-range sensors for several crucial minutes. Meanwhile, Admiral Carter was fighting his own battle. The Liberty's Edge traded shots with 2 Zalarian battleships, its thick armor absorbing hits that would have destroyed a smaller vessel. Carter's ship was tough, but it was taking heavy damage. "Shields at 60%, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. We can't take much more of this." Carter watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The human fleet was holding its own, but barely. They had destroyed or damaged 8 Zalarian ships, but they were losing vessels too. The mathematics of the battle were simple and brutal. "Signal the fleet," Carter ordered. "Begin fighting withdrawal to the inner system. Make it look desperate." This was the hardest part of the plan. The human ships had to retreat in a way that looked like a real defeat, not a planned maneuver. Carter's captains were skilled actors, making their withdrawal appear panicked and disorganized while actually maintaining perfect coordination. "Commander," Blake's remaining destroyers covered the retreat, their ships darting back and forth to intercept Zalarian fire aimed at the larger vessels. Blake herself took her ship between a damaged human cruiser and 3 enemy destroyers, absorbing fire that would have finished off the wounded vessel. "Blake's ship is taking heavy damage," Foster reported. "Her engines are failing." Carter watched as the Defender limped away from the battle, smoke and flames trailing from its hull. Blake had played her part perfectly, making her ship look like it was barely holding together while actually maintaining full combat capability. The human fleet fell back toward Earth, the Zalarian ships pursuing them eagerly. Admiral Vextar watched the retreat with satisfaction, convinced that he was witnessing the collapse of human resistance. "Their formation is breaking apart," Commander Krelta observed with pleasure. "They're running like frightened animals." "As expected," Vextar replied. "No primitive species can stand against the might of the Empire. Signal the fleet to maintain pursuit. We'll finish them off near their homeworld, where the survivors can watch their planet die." The running battle continued for hours as the fleets moved deeper into the solar system. The human ships fought desperately, their crews performing acts of heroism that would have been legendary if anyone had been there to record them. Ship after ship fell behind, apparently too damaged to continue, while the survivors pressed on toward Earth. By the time the fleets reached Mars orbit, the human force had been reduced to just 8 ships. Admiral Carter's Liberty's Edge led the survivors, its hull scarred by dozens of hits, but still fighting. Behind them, the Zalarian fleet advanced in triumph, already planning the bombardment of Earth. "Admiral," Foster said quietly, "we're approaching the rally point." Carter nodded. The hardest part was almost over. Soon, the Zalarians would learn the truth about human military planning. But for now, he had to continue the deception. "Signal Earth Defense Command," he ordered. "Tell them the outer defense has failed." Request immediate evacuation of all civilian populations. The message was broadcast on frequencies the Zalarians could intercept, adding to the illusion that humanity was facing complete defeat. Admiral Vexstar heard the transmission and felt a surge of satisfaction. The humans were beaten, their spirit broken down as the battered human fleet limped toward Earth. The moon hung in space ahead of them like a silver shield. Behind it, hidden from Zalarian sensors, something waited that would change everything. But Admiral Vexstar saw only a defeated enemy fleeing toward their doomed homeworld. The trap was almost ready to spring. Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching Earth grow larger on the main viewer. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and defenseless. Just like hundreds of other worlds, the Zalarian Empire had conquered over the centuries. His fleet of 42 remaining ships moved through space in perfect formation, ready to deliver the final blow. Admiral, the surviving human ships have taken position behind their moon, reported Commander Krelta. 8 vessels, all showing heavy damage. They appear to be making a final stand. Vexstar made the sound that passed for laughter among his species. 8 ships. This is what the mighty human resistance has been reduced to. Signal the bombardment fleet. Prepare to destroy their homeworld. On the other side of the moon, Admiral Carter sat in his command chair aboard the Liberty's Edge. His ship looked battered and broken from the outside, with scorch marks and fake damage panels making it appear ready to fall apart. But appearances could be deceiving. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Commander Foster from her station. The deception is holding perfectly. Zalarian sensors show us as nearly destroyed. Carter nodded slowly. Signal Commander Blake. It's time. Light years away from Earth, Commander Susan Blake sat in her real command center aboard the heavy cruiser Defiant. Her ship was one of hundreds hidden throughout the solar system, waiting for this exact moment. The Defender, the ship she had appeared to command during the battle, was actually an unmanned decoy loaded with explosives and controlled by remote. Blake opened a secure channel to Admiral Carter. Liberty Command, this is Blake. All units are in position and ready to execute. Carter's voice came back clear and steady. Understood, Commander. Execute Operation Thunderstorm. All units, this is Liberty Command. Execute Thunderstorm. Repeat, execute Thunderstorm. The space around Earth suddenly came alive with activity. Behind the moon, in the asteroid belt, hidden among the outer planets and scattered throughout the solar system, hundreds of human warships began powering up their engines and weapons. The real Sol Defense Fleet was about to reveal itself. Admiral Vexstar was studying a tactical display when his sensor officer, Lieutenant Yexenol, suddenly stood up from his station with alarm. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Multiple hyperspace contacts dropping out of FTL. Vexstar turned to look at the display, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of contacts were appearing on the screen, then hundreds. Ships were decloaking all around his fleet, emerging from hiding places he never knew existed. That's impossible, Vexstar whispered. Where did they come from? The answer came from Admiral Carter himself. The human commander opened a channel to the Zalarian flagship, his face appearing on the main viewer. Behind him, the bridge of the Liberty's Edge looked completely different than it had during the battle. Clean, undamaged, and filled with confident officers working at their stations. Admiral Vexstar of the Zalarian Empire, Carter said calmly. I am Admiral Ryan Carter, commander of the Sol Defense Fleet. Welcome to Earth. Vexstar stared at the human admiral in shock. This is impossible. Your fleet was destroyed. We saw your ships burning. Carter smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. What you saw, Admiral, was a screening force. A small advance unit designed to study your tactics and capabilities while revealing nothing about our own. The ships you fought were decoys, remotely controlled vessels meant to gather intelligence. On the tactical display, Vexstar watched in horror as more and more human ships revealed themselves. The 8 damaged vessels behind the moon suddenly showed their true nature, their hulls changing as holographic projectors shut down. They were not damaged at all. They were pristine warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the Zellarians had seen before. "Allow me to introduce you to the real Soul Defense Fleet," Carter continued. "Admiral Kate Murphy, commanding the dreadnought Washington's Hammer. Admiral Rick Thompson, aboard the carrier Victory Eternal. 312 vessels in total, all crewed by officers who have trained their entire lives for this moment." The Washington's Hammer was a massive ship, easily twice the size of Vexstar's flagship. Its weapons batteries could be seen clearly, even from a distance, row upon row of guns that could turn a planet into dust. The Victory Eternal was different, but equally impressive, its launch bays opening to release swarms of advanced fighters. "You lied to us," Vexstar said, his voice filled with rage and disbelief. "We gathered intelligence," Carter corrected. "Something your empire should understand, since you've been doing it to other species for centuries. The difference is they were much better at it than you are." More human ships continued to decloak throughout the solar system. Commander Blake's cruiser squadron appeared near Mars, their weapons already locked onto Zellarian targets. Near Jupiter, an entire battle group of human dreadnoughts dropped their stealth systems, revealing themselves like giant predators emerging from hiding. "This is Admiral Kate Murphy aboard the Washington's Hammer," came a new voice over the communication channel. "Zellarian fleet, you are surrounded and outgunned. Lower your shields and prepare to surrender or face the consequences." Vexstar looked at his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Fear. The humans had not just hidden the size of their fleet. They had positioned ships all around his force while he was focused on the fake battle near Earth. His fleet was trapped in the middle of a perfect encirclement. "Admiral," Commander Krelta said quietly, "we're receiving targeting locks from over 200 human vessels. They have us surrounded completely." But Admiral Carter was not finished with his revelations. "Perhaps you're wondering how we knew. You were coming, Admiral Vexstar. How we had time to prepare this reception for you." The main viewer changed to show another human officer, this one wearing the uniform of Deep Space Reconnaissance. "This is Captain Greg Stevens of the Stealth, Ship Shadow Walker. My crew and I have been operating in Zellarian space for the past 8 months, mapping your military installations and monitoring your communications." Vexstar's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. No alien vessel has ever penetrated Empire space undetected. "Actually, we have 17 reconnaissance units currently operating throughout your territory," Stevens replied. "We've been watching your empire for years, Admiral. We know about your military bases, your patrol routes, your supply lines. We even know about the reinforcement fleet you have stationed 3 systems away, waiting for your signal." The Zellarian Admiral felt the deck seem to shift under his feet. Everything he thought he knew about this situation was wrong. The humans had not just defended themselves. They had been studying the Empire, preparing for this exact confrontation. But how? Vexstar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Carter appeared on the screen again. "When Captain Morrison returned with news of your empire 3 months ago, he didn't just bring a warning. He brought detailed sensor readings of your ships, their capabilities, their weaknesses. Our intelligence services have been preparing for this possibility for decades, Admiral. We identified your empire as a potential threat long before you ever heard of humanity." The truth was even worse than Vexstar had imagined. Humanity had not just reacted to the Zalarian threat. They had been proactive, identifying the Empire as an enemy and preparing accordingly. Their military doctrine was not defensive but offensive, designed to project power across interstellar distances. The sole defense fleet you see around you represents approximately 12% of human military capability. Carter continued. We maintain similar fleets around all of our colony worlds, and our deep space forces haven't even been recalled yet. What you thought was our entire civilization's military is actually just the local garrison of one star system. Vexstar sank into his command chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his miscalculation. The Empire had faced many enemies over the centuries, but never one like this. Humanity had not just built a powerful military. They had built an intelligence network that spanned the galaxy. You have 30 minutes to decide, Admiral, Carter said. Surrender your fleet for repatriation to Zalarian space or face annihilation. Those are your only options. Around the Eternal Dominion, human warships moved into final attack positions. Their weapons were charged and ready, their crews prepared for battle. But Vexstar could see that they were disciplined, professional soldiers rather than savage warriors. They would destroy his fleet if necessary, but they took no pleasure in the prospect. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vexstar faced an enemy that was not only stronger than his own forces, but smarter as well. The Zalarian Empire had finally met its match, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Admiral Vexstar stared at the tactical display on his bridge, watching the human fleet surrounding his ships. 312 vessels, all with their weapons pointed at his 42 remaining ships. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. He had no choice. Signal all ships, Vexstar said quietly to Commander Krelta. Lower shields and power down weapons. We surrender. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. In 3,000 years of Zalarian military history, no Imperial fleet had ever surrendered to an alien species. But the alternative was the complete destruction of his force, and Vexstar was not ready to sacrifice his crews for pride. Admiral Carter received the surrender notification on his bridge. Aboard the Liberty's Edge. Zalarian fleet has powered down weapons and lowered shields, reported Commander Foster. They're requesting terms for repatriation. Signal Admiral Murphy to take custody of their ships, Carter ordered. Full security protocols. I want boarding. Parties on every Zalarian vessel within the hour. As human Marines began the process of securing the enemy fleet, Carter opened a private channel to Admiral Vexstar. Admiral, you and your senior staff will be transferred to the Liberty's Edge. We have much to discuss. 2 hours later, Vexstar found himself in the conference room of the human flagship, sitting across from Admiral Carter and several other human officers. The room was simple but elegant, nothing like the ornate chambers of Imperial ships. Everything about human design seemed focused on function rather than display. I don't understand, Vexstar said, his translator converting his words into human language. Why did you let us surrender? Why not simply destroy us as an example to others? Carter leaned back in his chair, studying the alien admiral with calm eyes. Because we're not the Zalarian Empire, Admiral. We don't rule through fear and intimidation. We prefer to win through superior planning and execution. But you could have destroyed us easily, Vexstar insisted. Your fleet outnumbers mine 7-1. Why show mercy to an enemy? Because this was never about destroying your fleet, Carter replied. This was about sending a message to your empire. The message is simple. Humanity is not a species you can conquer. We're too well prepared, too well organized, and too well informed about your capabilities. As they spoke, events were unfolding across Zalarian space that would confirm Carter's words in the most dramatic way possible. Captain Greg Stevens sat in the command center of his stealth ship Shadow Walker, watching as similar vessels throughout the Empire receive their activation codes. All units, this is Stevens. Operation Nightfall is now active. Repeat, Operation Nightfall is active. Begin primary targets. Across the Empire, 17 human stealth ships began attacking key military installations. These were not random strikes, but carefully planned operations designed to cripple the Empire's ability to respond to the crisis. Communication relays, supply depots, and command centers disappeared in precisely timed explosions. On the Imperial capital world of Zeller Prime, High Counselor Zethran was meeting with his military advisors when the first reports began arriving. The massive alien stood over 8 feet tall, his scales a deep purple that marked him as one of the Empire's ruling class. "What do you mean? 17 simultaneous attacks?" Zethran demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. How could 17 alien ships operate in our space without being detected? General Vexver, the Empire's chief military strategist, studied the reports with growing alarm. "High Counselor, these attacks are not random. They've targeted our primary communication hubs and supply centers. Whoever planned this knows our military structure better than some of our own officers." "That's impossible," Zethran replied. "The Empire has maintained security protocols for millennia. No alien species has ever penetrated our space." "Apparently we were wrong," Vexver said grimly. "These humans have been operating in our territory for months, possibly years. They know everything about us." The reports continued to pour in. Throughout the day, human ships appeared out of nowhere, struck their targets with surgical precision, and vanished back into space before Imperial forces could respond. Each attack was perfectly coordinated with the others, suggesting a level of planning and intelligence gathering that shocked the Empire's leadership. But the military strikes were only the beginning of the Empire's problems. On dozens of worlds, throughout Zalarian space, subject species were receiving broadcasts that changed everything. The transmissions showed the surrender of Admiral Vextar's fleet, along with detailed information about human military capabilities. On the industrial world of Kethmos, the local Kethran population watched in amazement as human ships appeared in their star system. Commander Amy Foster stood on the bridge of her cruiser Liberator, broadcasting to the planet below. "People of Kethmos, this is Commander Foster of the human fleet. Your Imperial garrison has been neutralized. You are now free to determine your own government and your own future." Similar scenes played out across the Empire as human forces appeared at world after world. They did not come as conquerors, but as liberators, offering military protection to any species that chose to break free from Imperial rule. The effect was immediate and devastating. Species that had been under Zalarian control for centuries suddenly saw hope for the first time in generations. Rebellions broke out on dozens of worlds as local populations rose up against their imperial governors. Back on Earth, Admiral Vextar was learning the full scope of human preparation from Admiral Carter. The two commanders had been talking for hours, and with each revelation, Vextar's understanding of his situation became worse. "Your reconnaissance ships have been watching us for how long?" Vextar asked, his voice barely a whisper. 8 years, Carter replied. "We identified the Zalarian Empire as a potential threat shortly after we established our first colonies outside the Sol system. Captain Morrison's encounter with your patrol fleet simply confirmed what we already suspected." 8 years, Vextar repeated. "You've been preparing for this war for 8 years." "We've been preparing for the possibility of this war," Carter corrected. "We hoped it wouldn't be necessary. But when you attacked Captain Morrison's ship and then invaded our space, you made the choice for us." Vextar looked around the conference room, seeing human efficiency in every detail. These were not primitive aliens stumbling into space. They were a civilization that planned decades ahead, that prepared for every contingency. "How many ships do you really have?" Vexstar asked. Carter smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. More than you want to know about, Admiral. Much more. The truth was becoming clear to Vexstar with every passing hour. Humanity had not just built a powerful military. They had built a strategic intelligence network that spanned the galaxy. They knew about Imperial troop movements, supply lines, and defensive positions. They had turned the Empire's own size against it, using the vast distances between systems to their advantage. Your Empire controls 300 star systems, Carter continued, but you can't defend them all simultaneously. We've known that for years. Our strategy was never to fight the entire Imperial military at once. It was to force you to spread your forces thin while we struck at key targets. Reports continued to reach Zeller Prime throughout the day, each one worse than the last. Human forces had appeared at over 50 Imperial worlds, offering protection to any population that chose independence. The Empire's subject species were abandoning their loyalty in droves, seeing humanity as their salvation from centuries of oppression. High Counselor Zethron stood in his command center, watching his empire crumble in real time. Red markers on. The galactic map showed systems in rebellion or under human protection. The markers were spreading like a disease across Imperial space. How many ships can we mobilize for counterattack? Zethron asked General Vexver. Less than we thought, the general replied grimly. The humans have been systematically destroying our supply depots and communication centers. Many of our fleets are cut off from command and running low on supplies. Then recall all forces to defend the core systems, Zethron ordered. We'll make our stand at the heart of the Empire. But even as he gave the order, Zethron knew it might be too late. The humans had struck with perfect timing, catching the Empire at its most vulnerable moment. They had turned the Empire's strength into weakness, using its vast size to spread Imperial forces too thin to be effective. On the Liberty's edge, Admiral Carter received reports of the successful operations throughout Imperial space. The plan was working better than even he had hoped. The Zelarian Empire was not being destroyed, but it was being forced to change. Admiral, Commander Foster said, we're receiving surrender requests from 18 more Imperial worlds. Local governors are asking for human protection. Carter nodded. Grant their requests. Deploy peacekeeping forces to maintain order during the transition. Admiral Vexstar watched this exchange with growing understanding. The humans were not conquering the Empire. They were liberating it, one world at a time. It was a strategy of such elegance and precision that it took his breath away. You planned all of this, Vexstar said quietly. Every detail. We planned for the possibility, Carter replied. We hoped your Empire would choose to negotiate rather than fight. But we were prepared for either outcome. As night fell, 3 weeks after the failed invasion of Earth, High Counselor Zethron stood in what remained of his command center on Zeller Prime. The once mighty heart of the Zelarian Empire now felt like a tomb. Half the star systems under Imperial control had declared independence, protected by human fleets that seemed to appear wherever they were needed. High Counselor, General Vexver said quietly, we've lost contact with another 12 systems in the Outer Rim. Human forces have established defensive positions around their homeworlds. Zethran looked at the galactic map, where red markers showed the extent of the crisis. What had once been a solid block of Imperial territory was now scattered islands of control, surrounded by a sea of rebellion and human protection. How many ships do we have left? Zethran asked. Fewer than 200 combat-ready vessels, Vexvar replied. The humans have been very selective in their targets. They've crippled our ability to resupply our fleets without directly attacking them. The truth was worse than even these numbers suggested. The remaining Imperial ships were scattered across dozens of systems, unable to coordinate effectively because the humans had destroyed most communication relays. Each fleet was fighting its own isolated battle against enemies who seemed to know their every move. On the human side, Admiral Patricia Clark commanded one of the liberation fleets from her flagship, the Constitution. Her ships had just finished securing the Vorthan system, where the local population had overthrown their imperial governor and asked for human protection. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Carl Brooks. The message was from Admiral Carter himself. All fleet commanders, this is Carter. Prepare to implement Phase 3 of the Liberation Protocol. We're moving to the negotiation stage. Clark smiled as she read the message. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The humans had never intended to destroy the Zalarian Empire completely. Their goal had always been to force it to change, to become something better than the oppressive military state it had been for millennia. Back on Earth, Admiral Carter was preparing for the most important meeting in galactic history. The neutral space station Hope's Harbor had been chosen as the site for peace negotiations, a massive structure built jointly by several species who had remained independent during the Empire's expansion. Admiral Vextar accompanied Carter to the station, no longer as a prisoner, but as an observer. During his weeks aboard the Liberty's Edge, the Zalarian admiral had come to understand that humanity fought very differently than his own species. They used overwhelming force not to destroy their enemies, but to make continued resistance pointless. I still don't understand your ultimate goal, Vextar said as their shuttle approached the station. You could have conquered the Empire completely. Why stop at liberation? Carter looked out at the massive station ahead of them. Because conquest doesn't solve the real problem, Admiral. The Empire exists because smaller species are afraid of being attacked by their neighbors. Remove that fear, and you remove the need for empire. The main conference room of Hope's Harbor was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. High Counselor Zethron sat at one end of the long table, flanked by the few imperial governors who still controlled their systems. At the other end sat Admiral Carter and Captain Jake Morrison, the man whose encounter had started this entire crisis. Between them were dozens of other beings, former imperial subjects who now led free governments, independent species who had watched the conflict from afar, and neutral observers who would help enforce whatever agreement was reached. High Counselor, Carter said formally, thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. I believe we can find a solution that benefits everyone in this room. Zethrin's purple scales seemed to have lost some of their luster over the past weeks. The once proud leader of a galactic empire now faced the prospect of ruling over a handful of systems. What terms do you offer? Zethrin asked, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. Carter activated a holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. We propose the establishment of a galactic defense accord. All member species agree to mutual defense and peaceful resolution of disputes. No species may attack another member, and all members pledge to come to the aid of any world under attack. And the Empire? Zethrin asked. The Zalarian Empire ceases to exist, Carter replied. In its place, we proposed a Zalarian Republic, a voluntary association of worlds that choose to remain united. Any world that wishes to leave may do so freely. The terms were more generous than Zethrin had expected. Many of the core Zalarian worlds would likely choose to remain together, forming a new nation that could prosper through trade and cooperation rather than conquest. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply replace the Empire with their own? Asked Ambassador Yellenth of the Korthek Collective, one of the independent species. Captain Morrison leaned forward. Because that was never our goal. We entered this conflict to protect ourselves and liberate the oppressed. Once the Galactic Defense Accord is established, humanity will withdraw our forces to our own territory. You would give up this power? Zethrin asked, genuine surprise in his voice. Power used wisely creates something better than itself, Carter replied. Power hoarded destroys everything around it, including the one who holds it. The negotiations continued for 3 days, with representatives working out the details of the new galactic order. The Galactic Defense Accord would be governed by a council with representatives from all member species. No single nation would have the power to dominate the others. During a break in the formal sessions, Zethran found himself walking through the station's observation deck with Admiral Carter. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships from dozens of species docked at the station's arms. "Your people are remarkable," Zethran said quietly. "In 3,000 years, the Empire never faced an enemy like you." "We're not your enemy anymore," Carter replied. "If you accept the accord, we'll be your allies. But you've shown that you could have destroyed us completely. Why should we trust you not to do so in the future?" Carter was quiet for a moment, watching a Vorthan trade ship dock at one of the nearby ports. "Because we've learned something that your empire never understood. True strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the ability to turn your enemies into friends." On the final day of negotiations, the Galactic Defense Accord was signed by representatives of 147 species. High Counselor Zethron signed as the first president of the Zalarian Republic, leading a voluntary association of 68 worlds that chose to remain united. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, marking the end of the Imperial Age and the beginning of something new. Species that had lived in fear for centuries watched as their former oppressors pledged to protect them from future threats. Admiral Carter stood at the podium, addressing the gathered representatives. "Today marks not the end of one empire, but the beginning of a new age. An age where species work together instead of fighting each other, where strength is used to protect the weak instead of exploiting them." In the months that followed, the new order began to take shape. Human fleets withdrew from liberated systems, as promised, replaced by multi-species peacekeeping forces. Trade flourished between worlds that had been cut off from each other for generations. The Zalarian Republic struggled at first, learning to govern through consent rather than force. But with human advisors and support from other Accord members, they gradually transformed into a productive member of the galactic community. Captain Morrison found himself appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. His small exploration ship had started a chain of events that reshaped the entire galaxy. During his inaugural speech, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 3 months ago, I encountered an alien fleet that demanded our surrender, Morrison said. Today, that same species is our partner in building a better future for all intelligent life. This is what's possible when we choose cooperation over conquest. 1 year after the signing of the Galactic Defense Accord, Admiral Carter stood on the observation deck of Earth's primary orbital station. The same deck where he had planned humanity's response to the Zalarian threat now offered a view of ships from across the galaxy, coming to Earth for trade, diplomacy, and friendship. Commander Lisa Park joined him, looking out at the busy space lanes around Earth. "Hard to believe it all started with one small exploration ship," she said. Carter smiled. "The galaxy needed to change, Lisa. We just gave it a gentle push in the right direction." "Gentle?" Park laughed. "We dismantled a 3,000-year-old empire in 3 weeks." "We dismantled an empire," Carter agreed. "But we built something better to replace it. That's the difference between conquest and liberation." As they watched, a Zalarian diplomatic vessel approached the station, its hull bearing the symbols of the new republic. Admiral Vexstar was aboard, coming to Earth for a joint military exercise between human and Zalarian forces. Former enemies working together to protect the peace they had built, the Ga.